we're looking at Livingston County, a small county, Ballard County, a small county, Caldwell County, a small county, and Russell County.
And these are the counties that have not been counted.
These are the counties that have not reported yet. And 10 of Davis County's precincts have not reported either. It's hard to imagine there being enough votes in those counties for Bevin to make a comeback here.
Right, and I think we just updated now, and it's now Andy Beshear up by about 13,000 votes. So again, even if Matt Bevin, these remaining counties, were to win all of them, 100% of them, right? Are there 14,000 votes for him out there? And what'll be interesting though is that look, every other Republican on the ballot in these statewide elections won. Daniel Cameron for Attorney General, Michael Adams went in really an upset victory over Heather French Henry for Secretary of State. Allison Ball was reelected, Mike Harmer was reelected, Ryan Quarles was reelected. The only Republican who is not winning and who looks like he won't win is Governor Bevin. And this will create, I think, a very interesting situation going into 2020. You'll have Andy Beshear, who will essentially, if he wins, and which it looks like he will be governor-elect. He'll be completely surrounded. He'll be surrounded by 2 supermajorities in the House and the Senate. All other constitutional offices will be Republican, and he will have less than 50% of the vote.
And how will that be for him doing his job moving forward?
I mean, he's going to have to partner with Republicans. I mean, he won't be able to get much, if anything, done. And this certainly, as Joe said earlier in the day, remember, Joe was the one who said this is a referendum on Matt Bevin. Governor Bevin's personality, his quarrels with other Republicans, including his lieutenant governor, all of those things began to add up. There's no other, I mean, I remember Republicans were telling me, Kirby, earlier in the year, we think we can run all of these constitutional officers and have the state legislature. Well, they came up, did all of that, except in the one office that everyone thought they might actually be able to keep, which is the governor's office. I mean, that has to be seen as, I think, and Joe may disagree with me, but that has to be seen, I think, as a referendum and against Governor Bevin and his leadership style, if anything else. I mean, it was Jerry Miller, a state legislator out of Louisville, who told me a few weeks ago, most Republicans, most conservatives agree with Matt Bevin on policy. In fact, I think Robert Stiver said it on KET today, State Senate President. Most Republicans and conservatives agree with Governor Bevin on policy. But Jerry Miller told me, the state representative told me, well, we don't necessarily like the way he tweets and like the way he handles things and like the way he treats people. I mean, that's clearly what this election is about.
And you were at the President Trump rally last night. I mean, and that wasn't enough to help push him
That's the other thing,
in the right direction.
Is that President Trump made a direct appeal to Kentuckians. He said, this will be seen as a loss for me. His exact quote was, don't let this happen to me, is what the president said, right? Governor Bevin told the New York Times he was going to win this race between 6 to 10%. I have sources in high officials in Republican politics here in Kentucky who said that, you know, when the president and the governor were meeting behind closed doors after the rally was over, that Bevin told Trump to his face that he was going to win by 10%. That's not going to happen today. I mean, whatever the final results will be, and it looks like it's getting closer as we talk here, less than 1% difference between Andy Beshear and Matt Bevin, he's not going to win by 6 to 10%. Joe, I wonder, looking at these results, if Libertarian John Hicks will be blamed as the spoiler. He has 2% and 27,999 votes exactly. If Governor Bevin had those votes, he would be winning.
Yeah, and it's easy to blame a third-party candidate, but quite often these are votes of people who don't like either of the candidate, and they weren't gonna vote for either of the two other guys to begin with. Well, I just did a little bit of quick figuring here, and if the counties and the precincts are still remaining vote at the same turnout that the rest of the state did, there are only 14,231 votes out there, and Beshear now leads by 13,000 votes.
So Bevin would have to win almost all of those votes.
He would if the turnout model carries through to those counties, Bevin has to win virtually every vote out there to pull this off.
So we do have, I think one of our viewers might want to know what time they can go to bed. They want to know, what time do you think we're going to know who wins the governor?
Any moment now. I mean, I think it's pretty clear. If those of us who analyze election results and look at it deeply, I think we sort of know here that it looks like Andy Beshear is going to be the next governor of Kentucky. It's not official yet, it hasn't been called, But as Joe pointed out, there are only so many votes left, and the likelihood that Governor Bevin will win 99 or 98% of those votes is very unlikely. So this could be called at any minute now. It's a question of, has Governor Bevin called Andy Beshear to concede?
Okay.
There are so many, I guess, things that are unknown, but I think it's pretty clear here that Governor Bevin is not going to win this election. I mean, that would be unprecedented if he were to.
And we're at 99% reporting. Ballard County just came in. It went for Bevin, but Andy Beshear remains 12,000 votes ahead. And so we are down to 1% left reporting, and gosh, somebody else, Caldwell County looks like they came in also. No, Caldwell County's still out. I'm sorry.
So, so while you're looking that up, some of our viewers, thank you for writing in too. We'd like to make this a three-way conversation. They're wanting to know clarification on Kentucky election rules. There's a question here: if it's under 4%, will there be a recount?
Anybody can request a recanvass, which they just go back and look at the machines and make sure that the numbers on the machines match up to what was reported to the Secretary of State. If anyone wants to do a recount, they would have to pay for that recount. So if Matt Bevin wants a recount when all is said and done here, he's going to have to come up with the money to do it. There is no state funded recount in Kentucky.
Okay.
Right, but let's remember, it was 4 years ago during the Republican primary. Far closer than this. It was 83 votes that Matt Bevin defeated then State Representative James Comer, then Agriculture Commissioner James Comer. He beat him by 83 votes in a statewide Republican primary. Comer did not ask for a recount, didn't want to pay for a recount. He accepted that margin. I don't know if a margin of 12,000, 10,000 votes is worth a recount to this governor.
How much does a recount cost?
More than I have.
I can't. I don't know that we've ever done a statewide recount in Kentucky, to be honest with you. So I don't know if anyone knows the cost of it at this point.
There have been recounts of the local races, state legislative races, where 1 vote is the separation of margin of victory for a candidate, but 12,000, 10,000 votes in statewide history, can't remember anything like that.
And I will tell you that a recanvass will not change 12,000 votes. No. I can promise you that.
We were talking a little while ago while we're waiting for more of these numbers to come in, that there is a building is it in Frankfurt, that when Bevin became governor, he had Jane Beshear's name taken off of it?
Yes, it was a building that had been part of the physical plant of the Capitol complex, and they didn't need it anymore for that purpose. And so Jane Beshear raised money to turn it into kind of an education center. It was called the Jane Beshear Education Center for a few months at the end of Steve Beshear's term. One of the first actions that Matt Bevin took when he became governor is he took her name off that building, which is kind of gets to this this hatred between the two families involved in this, the Bevin family and the Beshear family, and this was a personal race. Don't mistake that at all. I mean, these guys do not like one another.
Governor Bevin continuously throughout the campaign would talk about Andy Beshear's father, former governor Steve Beshear, referred to their family as corrupt. Often would point to different scandals in Steve Beshear's term. It was deeply personal. But beyond that, just about every combat that Governor Bevin had was personal to some degree. I mean, it was personal between him and former Republican House Speaker Jeff Hoover, the first Republican House Speaker in almost 100 years. It was very personal between the two of them. It seemed to get at the end very personal between him and current Lieutenant Governor Janine Hampton, who he had a budding friendship with. Just about every beef that Governor Bevin had, including the basketball coach of the women's basketball team here at the University of Louisville, seemed to be somewhat personal. And I think in many ways, Kirby, that was what has caught up with the governor tonight, is that there are just too many of these to ignore, and too many of these incidents that had nothing to do with really government and governing, right? Like from his Twitter account, like having these fights with people unnecessarily. I think it did eventually catch up with the governor, because most Republicans, they love the policies that Governor Bevin has signed into office. Right to work, charter schools, right? Like they love his advocacy for school choice. It's not a policy thing here as much as this governor's personality often hurt him amongst his own party. And on the policy end, he already had Democrats who were feverishly waiting to vote against him. Teachers, union folks, all those folks couldn't wait to get a bite of the apple. And there was an opening because of his poor relationship in his own party.
And it looks like we have, nope, that message was just deleted. So I'm going to not relay that message to you. So what else do we
We have 40 precincts left.
Yeah.
We have 40 precincts. The vast majority of or not the vast majority, but the bulk of them are in Russell County. Jeff Hoover, the former House Speaker who does not get along with Matt Bevin, that's his home county. There are 16 precincts there. They have not reported. The other ones are just precincts that are scattered around Kentucky. And Beshear still has a 10,000 vote lead.
Right.
Do we know if absentee ballots have been counted?
Yes. The absentee ballots were counted earlier in the day, especially the easiest ones were the ones on the machine at the office, the clerk's office where you would go in and vote in person. They've counted the other ones. They should have counted all the other ones. So it's pretty much.
And again, I think we have to now, at this point, with these numbers that we're looking at, I think we have to now turn and pivot here and start talking about how is Andy Beshear, if he's elected governor, if these numbers hold, how does he govern? Mm-hmm. Right? He will be ridiculed heavily at all sides. He will have a supermajority in the House, supermajority in the Senate. Every other constitutional officer will be a Republican, and he did not win with a mandate. He won by the thinnest, it seems, of margins possible against the least popular governor in the country. There will be considerable hurdles still for him to face, but I do think that the governor, I think that Beshear, if he is ultimately elected, will be able, I think, to make the argument of, let's bring this back down a notch. Part of his campaign was always about civility. He always said, look, Governor Bevin's a bully, he's unhinged, he's erratic. We need to bring basic civility back to our government. And I think that in many ways is what was on a lot of these voters' minds. There are areas in here which Kenton County, Campbell County, everyone knows those are Republican areas.
Yeah.
That is where the Tea Party in Kentucky at least was headquartered in a lot of ways back in 2009, 2010, right? Andy Beshear won that pretty handily, pretty easily. There were eastern Kentucky counties that he clearly won pretty decisively. And of course, Louisville and Lexington blowing those margins out in ways that no one was anticipating. No one was saying he was going to win by 97 to 100,000 votes. Republicans were thinking, oh, Bevin's going to lose Louisville 65,000, maybe 75,000 votes. This is certainly, I think, a rejection maybe just of Matt Bevin personally, more than any particular policy or anything of that nature.
What policies moving forward, though, can we expect from Beshear based on how he ran?
Well, I think you're certainly going to see him advocate for casino expanded gaming. He's going to make the argument that, look, if you really want to handle and get a hold of this pension crisis, I want to take all of the money from expanded gaming and put it into the pension situation, put it in the pension coffers. The problem for Andy Beshear is that his campaign was using very optimistic numbers on those projections. He was projecting that, expanded gaming is going to get $550 million. Well, that assumes the best market possible. That assumes that market will be stable. Damon Thayer and other Republican leaders and legislators have said that's dead on arrival. It will be interesting to see if that was just campaign talk or would that be governing talk. The Beshear campaign said, look, that's what these folks are saying now in a tight race. Their minds will change once the election is over. The other thing for Andy Beshear is he has some big promises he has to keep. He promised teachers a $2,000 annual pay raise, which will cost about $84 million in total. But the first thing, if Andy Beshear wins this race, which again, it looks like he will, he's up by about 8,000 votes with about 20 precincts left.
22 precincts. He leads by 8,147 votes.
We're getting to the wire here, but It looks like he'll be able to keep this margin with the thinnest and thinnest of margins. If that holds, I think for Andy Beshear, the question now becomes, how do I govern around gaming? How do I pay for these things that I said I was going to pay for? And how do I please my constituents while also having this very adversarial legislature at my back?
One thing we also need to think about is, what does this mean for Matt Bevin? He was one who saw himself as something more than the governor of Kentucky at some point. Does this end his political career in Kentucky? Can he run for the Senate again, which is the way he started his political career in Kentucky, running for the Senate against Mitch McConnell and losing in the primary?
Right.
Or does this tell him that, you know, we've had enough of Matt Bevin in Kentucky and we don't want him anymore? If that's the case, does he look toward the presidential race in not in 2020, but in 2024? Does he think he can get this Donald Trump sort of constituency behind him for a national bid?
I mean, there are folks already affiliated with Senator McConnell who have already been texting me saying the last thing the governor should do and think about is running against the senator again in a primary. Again, this is a particular moment in our political history. Clearly, Kentucky is on a Republican trajectory. Republicans have just about control of every office now and have control of the legislature in ways they've never seen ever before. And I think what you're going to see is it's going to be interesting on Wednesday. Like I said, if these numbers hold, how will Republicans rationalize this? Will they simply blame everything on Matt Bevin and say, oh, it was him and his personality?
Yes.
That will likely be, I can predict that will probably be what they end up doing.
Yes.
And what does that mean for Andy Beshear moving forward? I mean, it's yeah.
Are we getting a? Oh nope, newsroom was all
Some noise in the
flitter over
newsroom.
there.
They're all excited.
I wasn't sure exactly if we had some new information for you or not, but yes. So that will be interesting to see what happens moving forward with Governor Bevin. We still call him Governor Bevin at this moment.
No, he's governor. I mean,
yeah.
at the end of the day, but
Yeah.
I mean,
Will be for the next 5 weeks.
right. And I think that the question is, has he talked to Andy Beshear? Has he called to concede? Is he contesting these numbers? Remember, Governor Bevin has based a large part of his political career on questioning orthodoxy, not just from the media, but from the judiciary. From all other institutions, he has thumbed his nose at it. So we're not hearing anything from either campaign right now on any crosstalk or conversation. You raised the question about recanvassing or recount. Does Governor Bevin contest these numbers? You know, he's someone who has always talked about voter fraud and issues with voting. He's often, from a lot of conservative bubble news organizations, made claims that have not held up to the facts necessarily all the time, sometimes denying things he's been said and recorded saying on tape. But does he contest these numbers? Like I said, it's very, very close. It gets closer each and every time, but there seems to be Governor Bevin's running out of territory. He's running out of votes to pick up in this race.
What do you think this says about the power of teachers in our state?
Look, teachers have always been a strong voting bloc in Kentucky. They've always shown up to vote. They've always got their family and their friends to vote. They were energized. There's no doubt. And Bevin does not lose without an energized group of teachers out there. But the fact of the matter is, you know, you look at these numbers in Louisville and in Lexington, where Andy Beshear appears to have won this race with huge margins. And this was not just teachers upset with Matt Bevin. This was a lot of people who saw Matt Bevin and did not like him.
I think it's a perfect storm. Remember, Governor Bevin had some problems with the University of Louisville when he sacked the Board of Trustees, saying how bad it was dysfunctional, how under Steve Beshear didn't have the right diversity numbers as required by state law. But there were folks who felt that the governor was attacking the University of Louisville, right? It's a perfect storm of all those things, Kirby. I don't think it's one thing or the other, but you cannot deny, and I disagree slightly with Joe on this, I think you cannot deny that having teachers as a constituency for Andy Beshear was an ace in the hole. That's a group of civically minded folks, civically engaged folks. For every teacher, you really have 5 people represented. They call in everyone on the phones. They're out there every day talking to folks. They were doing their own bus tour as Democrats and Republicans were doing their different respective tours. Teachers were doing their own bus tour around the state in different parts of the state, including Eastern Kentucky. When Governor Bevin would be out in Eastern Kentucky, which you would think would be a very comfortable space for him politically, out in places like Paintsville, right? The teachers followed him out there and heckled him and, and rang the bell on him just as much as they would here in Louisville or in Lexington. The perfect storm, you had an unpopular governor and an unpopular political party. That would be the Kentucky Democratic Party. And we think we're learning tonight that Governor Bevin's unpopularity caught up with him to a certain degree. I mean, there was no denying that. I mean, if Governor Bevin had maybe played by the rules of politics just a little bit on some of these other issues, he might not have faced this issue. There were many teachers who said, look, if the governor had just apologized about saying that our protests led to children being poisoned or sexually assaulted as he had during one legislative session, that would have done wonders in sort of smoothing things over. Instead, the governor would say, when he was responding to that controversy, saying, I'm sorry if you were offended by that. I'm sorry that you may have misunderstood it. Governor Bevin never at one point in his tenure would admit any wrongdoing, would ever admit that he ever made a mistake or said the wrong thing. And I think that's caught up with him both in the primary and I think in this general election. I think Kentuckians culturally just were offended by that.
Do we have any idea of the turnout, voter turnout at this point, or is it too early to say?
I have not seen that yet, and I've not looked for it.
If you look at the numbers in Jefferson County alone, the turnout was higher.
It was.
I mean, I think Matt Bevin and Jack Conway's combined votes compared to Andy Beshear and Matt Bevin's combined votes in this year are far higher than they were 4 years ago. It'll be interesting to see how the state overall turnout is and how turnout may have been better in certain areas. What we may find here is that it was Louisville and Lexington that put this over the hump, that there was extra turnout there. Those, Joe said earlier, he was doing the tour of the state. Many folks who weren't connected to and didn't really care about this gubernatorial race were in areas where there isn't a lot of newspapers or media that really connected them to the race. But in Louisville, Lexington, that rumbling was always a drumbeat of the news.
The Democratic Party of Kentucky has just put out an email in which they are claiming victory in the governor's race.
And they're referring to Andy Beshear and his running mate, Jacqueline Coleman, as governor-elect and lieutenant governor-elect, saying that they have a hard-fought victory tonight. Voters send a clear message that they're ready to turn the page on 4 years of failed, divisive Republican governance. That's the Kentucky Democratic Party's statement tonight.
And what we're looking at, we're still sitting here with 22 precincts out.
Let's go back to the numbers and see if that is updated at all.
And the vast majority of those being in Russell County, where there are only 14,000 voters total. Beshear maintains an 8,000 vote lead at this point, and then we'll go back to see.
So it's all Russell County at this point.
It's all Russell County at this point. So Jeff Hoover's home county will decide if Matt Bevin has a chance to win this election.
Right.
Which I'm sure Jeff.
And that may
Hoover
explain
is,
the governor's reticence right now.
Yeah.
He may be out there going, you know what? I still got a shot. I'm not going to concede one bit at all to this. My prediction of 6 to 10% obviously isn't going to come true, but 8,000 votes or so, with about 14,000 voters still left out there in a county that Governor Bevin probably feels like he could win 2 to 3. He's probably sitting back going, not so fast. Let's.
Yeah.
Russell County could be the Florida of 2000 here for him.
I was going to say, things have happened. Don't go to bed. Whoever that was, wondering if they should, what time this would be over with. So as we're moving along here, does it seem as though, I know we talked about this earlier in the evening, but with Trump, President Trump coming to Kentucky, there was Governor Bevin with President Trump, big rally. Do you think that perhaps turned some people off?
I don't know if it turned people off. I think it reminded probably liberal voters in Lexington, Louisville, what they already were going to do on election night anyway, if they were going to be voting on election day. If you didn't like Matt Bevin, probably if you're a Democrat, a liberal Democrat, you probably don't like President Trump either. So I don't think that moved the needle one way or the other. I think some of this was baked in over years, right? I mean, I think, again, the policies and the personality that Governor Bevin had already offended liberal Democrats. He knew that. He knew that those folks weren't ever going to support him no matter what. His appeal was really to values voters and those rural conservatives in the hollers of parts of Kentucky, asking them to get out, saying, hey, I'm on your side when it comes to abortion. I'm on your side when it comes to defending President Trump. I'm on your side when it comes to guns, et cetera, et cetera. The real question might be, were those folks just too detached? Did they not have the same margin of victory and same turnout rate and level that Democrats did in those other areas? That combined with the governor's fights within his own party, and probably you had some suburban Republicans, which I'm particularly interested in Louisville and Lexington, those suburban areas where you saw someone like a Phil Moffitt, a former state representative, conservative state representative, who lost his reelection bid last year, right? Lost it to a political newcomer, right? In a sort of a swing district. Trump's effect in the suburban areas has been turning a lot of those folks to the Democrats. It'll be interesting to see once we dig into the numbers where that comes from. But there's a there's a mixed bowl, a mixed soup, Kirby, of election results. Everyone likes to point to one thing or the other. Again, I think this is a perfect storm of an unpopular governor, a very engaged, enraged constituency supporting Andy Beshear, and a Republican Party that, for everything else, had a pretty successful night, had a very successful night.
And where is the Andy Beshear campaign party being held tonight?
They're down at C2, down in the Shelby Park area in Louisville.
Yeah.
Governor Bevin and the Republican Party, they're all at the Galt House in Louisville as well. So, everyone was gearing up for tonight, prepared. Like I said, Republicans are having a very good night, except for the top of the ticket. You saw that other Republican candidates actually outpaced Governor Bevin. Daniel Cameron, Allison Ball, all of them did better than Governor Bevin in terms of raw votes. And I think it's because Governor Bevin became a lightning rod. He knew that. He said it. He bragged about it on the campaign. He said, you can't have part of me and part of Andy Beshear. You got to make one choice or the other. And I think they made their choice. They're making their choice. And like I said, there's a slim possibility here that Governor Bevin could pull this out if he gets a high enough margin of those votes. But as each tick comes in, it's still 8,000, and now we have 19 precincts left. As each tick comes in, Governor Bevin's running out of time, running out of votes.
So 19 precincts to come in at this point.
And those precincts, 16 of those are in Russell County, 1 is in Barron County, and 2 are in Livingston County. So Russell County is going to make the decision here.
What about, do you have any thoughts on any of the other races?
I think the most significant race, other than the governor's race, is the attorney general's race. Kentucky has elected its first African-American attorney general, its first African-American candidate, period, who's running a state standalone race. Obviously, Janine Hampton broke that color barrier in 2015, but lieutenant governor runs as the running mate of the governor. You don't vote for lieutenant governor, you're voting for governor. Daniel Cameron won the Republican primary, won this general election pretty convincingly. I think you will see Senator Mitch McConnell, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who is Daniel Cameron's political mentor, his professional mentor. I think that will certainly be a feather in his cap. Senator McConnell, one thing that he takes personally is being called or being associated with race or racism. And this will certainly be a feather in his cap, being a part of electing the first African American to statewide office in a time where African Americans are overwhelmingly voting for Democrats. You have not seen, I believe, ever in Kentucky's history, a non-white Democratic nominee for statewide office.
Yeah, I don't remember that.
It's never happened.
Yeah.
And not only have Republicans put up the first African American to break the color barrier with Janine Hampton, they put up a Hispanic American running for lieutenant governor. They put up an African American running for attorney general, and that individual won. I mean, that's a moment in history that cannot be overlooked, in my view.
And Daniel, he worked for McConnell at some point?
Yes, he worked for Senator McConnell as his general counsel. Before that, he worked as a clerk for a judge that Senator McConnell had put on the bench. Before that, I believe he worked for another McConnellite. So all of Daniel Cameron's political and personal career and professional career has been connected to Senator McConnell in some way, shape, or form. Experience was what Greg Stumble, the Democrat running, was beating Daniel Cameron up on in the final 2 weeks, and it seemed like it was really an effective attack on Daniel Cameron. He hadn't prosecuted any case. Not even a traffic ticket was what Stumbo would often repeat to folks. However, I think Stumbo's baggage and character also was on the ballot. And you had Democrats today even saying that it might have been better for us to have a primary. It might have been better maybe for State Senator Morgan McGarvey to have run. Everyone has 20/20 hindsight. But, I think, again, this is a moment you can't overlook, breaking the color barrier.
And when you look at Daniel Cameron, you also have to look at a potential future candidate for the U.S. Senate.
Yeah.
Mitch McConnell is running in 2020. Pretty good chance with his age that he may not seek re-election in 2026.
Yeah, and
if that's the case, you've got Daniel Cameron, who he thinks of as a son, standing ready to run for that U.S. Senate seat.
Yeah, I mean, the proximity, the closeness of that relationship is undeniable.
Yeah.
When I asked Daniel at a political debate, is there ever an issue you ever disagreed with Senator McConnell on? And he couldn't think of one. And eventually he did think of one. It was him advising the senator to vote against Loretta Lynch, ironically, who was trying to be the first African-American woman to be U.S. Attorney General. She was ultimately elevated to that spot, and Senator McConnell did vote for her. Again, I think Joe's right. I mean, Daniel Cameron, I think you'll see his face and name across the country. Here was an African-American endorsed by President Trump, supported by Senator McConnell, supported by the Republicans, at a time when Republicans really are under pressure on the question of race. Polling shows the vast majority of African Americans view President Trump as either a bigot or a racist, right? And here you had Daniel Cameron saying, I'm a conservative, I am African American, I'm proudly both. I'm embracing my heritage. His first ad was him embracing sort of the party of Lincoln, right? Daniel's always had to walk that racial tightrope. That will continue as his time as Attorney General. Particularly, Daniel Cameron ran as Attorney General saying, I want to depoliticize the office. Well, if Andy Beshear ends up winning, and Andy Beshear is governor,
ain't depoliticizing nothing.
he will get pressure from Republicans who will say, you need to do the exact same thing to Andy Beshear that he did to Matt Bevin as governor. You need to use that office and pester and prod the governor.
And the thing about the Attorney General's office is it gives the Republicans a person in Frankfurt when the legislature is gone, where the governor, a time when the governor has his power to do things through the executive order process and through the rulemaking process in implementing the laws that the legislature passed. And so the person that they have there in Frankfurt who will be looking over Governor Andy Beshear's shoulder, if that plays out here, will be Daniel Cameron and won't be Greg Stumbo. And that is huge for the Republicans.
Yes.
So,
and the first Republican, again, the first Republican elected Attorney General since World War II, by the way. So other piece of history there. It's been a long time since Republican has held that office,
since
long before
World War II.
Right.
Wow.
And we are still hanging tough on 19 precincts out there reporting, left to report, I'm sorry. Andy Beshear has a 7,667 vote lead. The precincts, as I said earlier, are in Russell with 16, then 1 in Barron and 2 in Livingston that we're still waiting on. So we are just
so hang with us.
Just hanging tough
Because
here.
I have no doubt that these two have plenty to fill us in.
We're all
on.
hanging on 19
They're-
precincts.
Yeah.
You are.
If you're in Russell County and you know the numbers, call us.
Count, keep counting.
What's your number? So let's talk a little bit about Secretary of State. Thoughts?
I think that I would consider that to be an upset. I mean,
Oh, definitely. A lot of people thought that Heather French Henry would be the leading vote getter of all the candidates out there, but she didn't raise money.
Based on just name recognition?
name
or-
recognition, the fact that she had probably the two best, I mean, other than being an astronaut, being a beauty queen and being someone associated and deeply connected to Veterans Affairs. She was the former Commissioner of Veterans Affairs for the state under both Steve Beshear and Matt Bevin.
And the veterans love her.
The veterans love her.
Sure.
Those were considered two commodities you just can't buy in politics, right? But Michael Adams, an election lawyer who worked for George W. Bush, who's worked for Senator Mitch McConnell, someone who believes we should have a voter ID in this state, kind of, often would run under the radar because, remember, the Republican legislature robbed the Secretary of State's office of a lot of its authority under Allison Lundigan Grimes, citing a lot of her controversy, saying she was abusing her power. So they took a lot of that away, her votes on the State Board of Elections. It will be interesting to see if Republicans change that tune, if they go back in and give those powers back now that they have a Republican as Secretary of State rather than Allison Lundigan Grimes or Heather French Henry.
Well, they may give that power back and put Jane Beshear's sign back on that building.
There you go.
Perhaps.
That's a possibility.
But we also have to let's look at other states. Let's look at North Carolina. Let's look at Wisconsin. Let's look at Michigan. When Democrats have taken back the governor's mansion in those states, Republican-controlled legislatures have swooped in and seized a lot of the power from the executive branch, taken a lot of those powers away. In North Carolina years ago, when Roy Cooper lost his governor's race to a Democrat, he called a special session, and Republicans went in there and they changed a lot of the appointment rules for the governor, et cetera. And don't think that Andy Beshear, if he ends up winning this, will have an easy time, not just from the positive sense of getting his agenda through, but you may see the Republican legislature go in and say, you know what, we do want to change who you can appoint to a board of trustees for a university without our approval, or who you can make a president of whatever organization or appoint to this particular board or hire as your chief information officer and pay them a certain amount of money. All those things could change if Andy Beshear ends up winning here.
Now, a lot of the key positions have to be approved by the state Senate already. So, Board of Trustees, that sort of thing. are all things that have to be approved by the state Senate. The state Senate has not been shy about refusing to give their approval to a governor of the other party. So don't know if they'll do that or not, but they could.
Do they just want to let this all go? I mean, like I said, if Andy Beshear was running based upon bringing civility and normalcy sort of back to our politics, maybe the legislature will meet him halfway and say, yeah, let's cool the partisanship, let's cool the tensions here, because we're going into 2020. Whoever the governor is, it's going to be a budget year. It's going to be another tight budget where pensions are going to be still going up as far as their costs, where you're still going to have public schools paid for, public safety paid for. There is going to be a needed conversation here, and perhaps a divided government, at least between the governor's mansion and the state legislature, can accomplish that. It certainly wasn't able to get through when Republicans had total control both of the governor's mansion and the legislature. Perhaps that's what Andy Beshear will seek, is a more reconciliatory government.
What about, I'm just curious about Andy Beshear and social media. Is he as prolific on social media as Governor
Not
Bevin?
in the same way. Andy Beshear is, like I said, methodical. He's disciplined. He is your traditional Democratic, traditional political candidate. Mm-hmm. He stays on message as best he can. He keeps a lot of his thoughts close to the chest when he hasn't made a full decision yet or wants to elaborate within his campaign. You can look and see how he ran his Attorney General's office for a lot of those keys and cues. I don't think you'll see him in the same way that Governor Bevin behaved on social media at all. I don't think that's even. No.
A lot of people think of Andy Beshear and they think they think boring. And,
right.
And
yes.
And to a large degree, that's maybe what Kentucky voters wanted in this election.
Yes.
They don't want the.
They don't want the governor fighting
antics
with the basketball coach of the women's basketball team.
Yeah.
Right. And this started really with Robert Goforth. I think the wake-up call for the Bevin campaign started in the primary. Robert Goforth, this freshman legislator from Eastern Kentucky, came out of nowhere and won around 40% of that primary vote. And Goforth's candidacy was not based upon some big policy difference with Governor Bevin.
Yeah.
Wasn't based upon some big political difference. He wasn't arguing that he's more conservative than Governor Bevin was, or more moderate or liberal than Bevin was. His argument was Governor Bevin's an outsider. He's a New England-born, New Hampshire-born native who doesn't understand our basic culture, our basic politeness, the basic graciousness that Kentuckians have, whether they agree or disagree on particular issues or not. One Goforth supporter said that Governor Bevin's not someone who they would invite to eat potato salad with Meemaw, right? And that was sort of the reason for that person supporting Goforth. At the state fair, when Chris Williams from WHAS, the political reporter there, confronted both of them and asked, have you two had a chance to talk and reconcile and maybe do a unity rally like we're seeing on the Democratic side for Beshear and Rocky Atkins? Are you interested in doing that? Goforth said, you have to ask the governor, it's up to him. When the governor was asked that question, Governor Bevin said to Chris Williams on TV at the state fair, who's Robert Goforth? Pretended like he didn't even know who his name was and said, oh, Goforth, a name so easily forgotten, right? And I think that 40% was sending Governor Bevin a message of, we agree with you on policy perhaps, but we don't like how you're behaving.
And we have an update here. Barron County has finally reported in. Andy Beshear maintains a 7,397 vote lead. There are 18 precincts reporting, 16 of those in Russell, 2 of those in Livingston County. So we're steaming toward the end here slowly.
So 18 have reported.
We're crawling to the end
18,
here.
Yeah.
18 need to report still.
18 need to report.
Out of 3,659 precincts statewide.
Well, what are they doing?
Counting by hand,
I guess so. Maybe they
using an abacus.
Take your time. Get it right. Get it right. Rather be right than wrong.
Hey, you know what we could do? Just real quickly, I want to remind our viewers, first of all, we'd like you to join in the conversation. Hey, look at this. We can have a 3-way, 4-way conversation until we get these precinct numbers in. But also, we have a newsletter that's going to be launching tomorrow morning. One of our political team is going to be writing that, and it's called On Kentucky Politics. I want to show you a little bit more about that right now.
Wherever you stand politically and whatever candidates you support,
The Courier Journal wants to be your go-to source for all things political in Kentucky. That's why we're launching a weekly newsletter capturing the exclusive, the enterprising, the interesting, and the essential aspects of politics in the Commonwealth. Starting next week, On Kentucky Politics will provide a roundup of the most important events and stories for Kentucky's political scene, details and analysis you won't find anywhere else. Jam-packed with coverage from the entire Courier Journal political team, our newsletter will provide must-read links from our recent coverage, in addition to political nuggets or social media buzz that you may have missed. Head to courierjournal.com to sign up for the free On Kentucky Politics. So that's tomorrow. It launches, and by the way, it's absolutely free. So we hope that you
Free 99.
free, not even 99.
I know. $3.99. Yeah.
All right, so we're getting a little more information in right now about the Beshear campaign. Some national news is actually reporting.
NBC News and Vox. That's Vox, VOX, not to be
Fox.
confused with Fox. Vox and NBC News have called the race for Andy Beshear. We're being told that Attorney General Beshear is about to take the stage, perhaps to make his victory speech. Not sure if he's heard from Governor Bevin or if Governor Bevin has actually conceded. The Associated Press has not called this race. That's usually what most news organizations base the calling of the race
So we're
upon.
waiting on that.
But we're waiting on that. But NBC News and Vox, VOX, have called the race for Andy Beshear, and he appears to be ready to take the stage.
So he can do that with 18?
He can do it whenever he wants.
So what would that make you think? Do you think that Governor Bevin has called to concede? I mean,
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
Like I said, as Joe pointed out, that these two are bitter rivals. I'd be surprised if they've ever had more than 5 personal conversations with one another. Beshear might be thinking, you know what, before the evening news starts, let me go ahead and make my victory speech and put the governor in a bit of a corner here and let him either concede or contest what it seems to be.
because our mathematician has been adding numbers all night. Approximately how many?
The 7,397 votes separate them at this point. The vast majority of votes are again are in Russell County, where there are about 14,000 total votes. The vast majority of those are Republican. It's about about 10,000 Republican, 2,000 plus Democratic, and then some others and some independents and that sort of thing.
And I think you as the viewers can't see here. We're talking about the numbers, but these maps are shaded, and they show you the margin of victory. And what's interesting here, Joe and Kirby, is that in Western Kentucky, sure, Governor Bevin won most of those counties out in Western Kentucky, but it doesn't seem like he won those by huge margins. It's a very light shade of red, very, very pink, more than red out there.
It's almost a peach.
Right, and you see here even in Northern Kentucky as well. Bevin, peach, pink colored, very light sort of victories, not these large margins. His best victories seem to be in the sort of eastern, southeastern sort of string here.
It's in the old, his big victories, Bevin's big victories come largely in the old 5th district, which was the 5th congressional district of Kentucky back when we had 7 congressional districts in the state. And it was a series of counties along the southeastern border that had long been a Republican county. I'm getting
We get something here on Russell County a little bit here.
Yeah, with 100% of Russell County reporting, we are seeing Bevin winning by about less than 3,000 votes. So
about 2,700 votes he won Russell County. That's according to the Kentucky Secretary of State's website. They have Governor Bevin winning 71% of the vote in Russell County with 4,252 raw votes. Andy Beshear getting 26.5% in Russell County with 1,571 votes. Joe's doing the math on that now, but that doesn't seem to be enough.
Yeah, that leaves Beshear with about a 4,700 vote lead, give or take, with 2 precincts remaining in Livingston County. If what we're seeing is correct, ladies and gentlemen, this is over with.
And let's just go back, because we may have some folks that are just joining us now who are curious about the idea of recanvassing when the votes are that close. And I know you say that's maybe not that close. There have been elections won by far fewer,
Right.
A smaller margin. But what are the rules here?
Well, again, a recanvass, which I would assume Governor Bevin will request, is just a simple thing where they go in, they look at the machines, they look at the votes on the machines, they look at the votes that are reported to the Secretary of State's office, and make sure that those match up. It's done in one afternoon generally, and it's a simple process that traditionally does not change very many votes whatsoever. You might have 2 or 3 votes here change, but I've never seen a significant number of votes change in 32 years of covering politics in Kentucky. I've not seen a significant number of votes change in a recanvass. If Governor Beshear looks at this, and I mean, we're talking about a race that will be decided by
less than 1%.
About 0.5% is what we're looking at here. If Governor Beshear decides he's going to go out, he's going to raise the money, he's going to do a recount.
Governor Bevin.
Bevin.
Governor Bevin.
I mean, I'm sorry.
That's all right. It's been a long night.
Yes. Governor Bevin decides to do this, then
Will that do anything to the time? I mean, you say he'd be in office for 5 more weeks?
the governor takes office the second Tuesday of.
Governor takes office a month early before everyone else does.
So
So
the second
here in
Tuesday-
Kentucky, we have an election in November. The new governor or the same governor takes the new term in December of that same year.
And the governor will be sworn in on the second Tuesday of December, and so we're waiting for that.
I think we got some news here, folks.
All right, you go find out what that news is. I'll keep talking to my good friend Joe Girth here.
Now my favorite thing about the timing of Kentucky's governor taking office is it comes before the Christmas tree lighting at the state capitol.
Is that intentional?
Well, it's just the way it works, and traditionally the incoming governor invites the new. Here, and Andy Beshear wins the Kentucky governor's race, 7,955 to 707,296. If the New York Times numbers are accurate, the Associated.
Point.
So
That will be interesting. Would that be the smallest margin?
you're asking me something I don't know the answer to.
That's all right.
We're going to be researching that.
I've been
trust
trying
me.
to do that all night, asking you questions that you don't know the answer
That's
to.
what you just stumped me there. But I mean, it's an exceptionally close race, and it's amazing that it's that close. It's amazing that it's that close, considering the fact that that Andy Beshear came out of Louisville and Lexington with 130,000 vote margin, and Governor Bevin almost made that up in Western Kentucky. But
I'm thinking a little bit about what the Republican headquarters must be like tonight. You've got all these winners, and then your governor has lost.
You know, traditionally, when the top of your ticket loses, a county or a party headquarters is like a morgue. And that's probably the case with the Republican Party right about now. They lost the key office in Kentucky. That said, there are some Republicans out there who probably aren't terribly upset because they were tiring of the governor's antics. They were tired of having to explain to their constituents why they were backing a governor who doing the things he was doing. You've got some legislators in Jefferson County, especially, who had closer than expected races last year in the legislative races. You had Republicans who lost in Jefferson County, largely because of the impact of Donald Trump and Matt Bevin, who were unpopular in Jefferson County. And so there are some who, while they wish they had held on to the governor's office, I'm certain are not sad to see Matt Bevin going away for now, at least, because they are just tired of dealing with the things that he was doing.
I've called in for some water for us because
fabulous.
We've been talking for 1 hour.
Oh my gosh.
You've done a fabulous job, by the way.
I don't have.
Well done.
I don't have that much interesting to say. I don't know how I can talk for an hour.
I'm endlessly filled with questions. So when I have an expert like you by my side, I can keep asking you questions.
I'm trying to figure out why the Associated Press is not called this yet. What they know that we don't. But again, I'm sitting here looking at the New York Times numbers, and
Shall I look around in the newsroom and ask them if anyone has heard anything? No? It didn't get unplugged, did it?
so
Well, yeah, it seemed a little anticlimactic, doesn't it?
it does. They're going to call it at some point, and we're going to. I hope we don't end up with a Dewey defeats human.
Yes.
Dewey defeats Truman headline here out of this.
And we were told just a little while ago that at the Beshear camp, they were getting ready to take the stage to, and you thought perhaps it was so that they could get in under the wire for the newscasts, but to celebrate, I guess we should say, their victory. So they must feel very confident in all of this, and
as well they should, if these if these numbers I'm looking at are correct.
Have we heard anything, gang? No? Oh, they're sending me a message. So let me have just a quick look here and see what this says. Here's running mate. Well, I'll let you report that.
Yeah, apparently Andy Beshear and his running mate Jacqueline Coleman have tweeted out a picture saying, "Thank you, Kentucky." So they are.
They're feeling confident.
They're feeling very confident right now, and we are still waiting on the Associated Press.
Maybe they have a pipeline to the Associated Press that we don't have right now.
So.
And they are at their headquarters is over off of Breckenridge Street, I believe. I think it's called the C2 event.
Yes.
I was driving into work this afternoon, and that lots and lots of news crews there. So much interest in this governor's race, not just here in the state of Kentucky, but across the nation. And you were telling me that part of that reason was that the other states that had governor's races, it was pretty cut and dry, but here...
Well, there just aren't that many races. Most states have gone to a political cycle in which elections fall in even years. Kentucky is an oddity in that we have a major race in an odd year, and that's the biggest thing. There are only a handful of races out there this year. The Mississippi governor's races tonight, the Kentucky governor's races tonight. We're waiting on the Louisiana governor's race, and then the Virginia legislature is up tonight also. But beyond that, there is not much going on, and so it creates this vacuum that Kentucky every 4 years seems to fill. And Matt Bevin has now gone on stage at the Galt House in Louisville, and he is talking and
congratulating all of the down ticket people.
Congratulating the down ticket people, and
we're kind of listening in, and we'll report it to you as we hear it here.
This is riveting video, I'm certain.
You and I are just a little bit out of earshot, but we're still waiting for the Associated Press to officially announced that Andy Beshear is the next governor of the state of Kentucky. In the meantime, Governor Bevin is on stage at his campaign headquarters, congratulating his fellow Republicans on their wins, and we're waiting to hear if he concedes. So far, he has not. In any case, any more word there in any of the numbers?
No more numbers. Don't expect to get any more tonight.
All right.
I think we're done on the numbers.
Oh, that's right. I've lost track of where we were.
Right.
We have 100%.
We have 100%.
We don't get 101.
What, I don't.
Bevin says he's not conceding.
He's
Bevin
not
says
conceding.
he is not conceding.
He said he's not conceding the race.
So
What does that mean?
that means the first step is he will ask for a recanvass, which again is just a recheck of the machines, make sure that those numbers match up with the numbers that were reported to the Secretary of State's office, and then he will have to then make a decision. He's got, maybe a week after that, I think, to decide if he's going to ask for a recount. But they got to get that recount moving quickly because the Kentucky governor takes office very quickly after the election, according to the Kentucky Constitution.
So an interesting turn of events.
Yeah, no doubt.
Governor Bevin says he will not concede, although it looks like with all precincts counted, he has lost his bid to be reelected by what, about 4,000?
Yeah, something like that.
4,000 votes?
Yeah. What,
He says he believes there's been irregularities and he's going to let the process handle it.
He's apparently Governor Bevin has said he believes that there has been irregularities in the election, and he is going to let the process handle it. So this could be an ugly fight that could ultimately make its way to the State Board of Elections to determine who is certified as a winner, and then it can get messy.
But bottom line is, a decision has to be made by what date? Before the Christmas tree is lit.
Yes, yeah, it's in early December.
Early December.
So.
No hanging chads.
No hanging chads. I don't believe anyone in Kentucky uses the punch cards anymore. So none of the guy looking like that and trying to figure out if it's a vote for Bevin or Beshear or who, or so that's a good thing. But it's gonna hang with us for a while here. And it looks like Andy Beshear has now gone on stage. He certainly is going to claim victory.
We're gonna have to stay here. We're gonna have to stay here until December, I think.
Yeah.
Are you doing anything for the next month and a half?
Apparently, I guess not. So
We'll ask him to keep bringing us waters.
I could use that pastry now.
Yeah. So Andy Beshear is now taking the stage at his headquarters.
Said voters sent a message for everyone to hear loud and clear.
Beshear, speaking at his in his victory speech, said the voters sent a message for everyone to hear loud and clear. Looks like his family is on stage with him.
He's talking about our values and how we treat each other and how important that is, which is what you and Philip were saying earlier, is a lot about his running on the idea of civility.
Yeah, one of his final campaign ads that he put up talked a lot about civility, and we knew that Bevin was going to have problems with that in the primary when Robert Goforth ran on that and got nearly 40% of the Republican vote and beat him in 32 counties, including some of the most Republican counties in Kentucky. So it's and it's that's the reason that he lost. Or appears to have lost, I guess. Had he treated people with respect, had he not called teachers names, had he not called anyone who disagreed with him names, had he not told the pastors who disagreed with his plan for stopping violence in West Louisville, that or suggesting that they were going to hell because they didn't agree with him. you know, we wouldn't be sitting here tonight talking about a loss or what looks to be a loss. AP is now saying that it's too close to call.
What happens now, boss?
Well, I mean, you don't have to wait for AP to call something.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the state acts on its own schedule. The State Board of Elections will look at the race after the recanvass, after a potential recount if that's in our future, and then they'll decide what to do from there. So it's a tight race. Bevin has apparently has lost to Beshear by 4,658 votes out of more than 1.4 million cast and counted. It's a margin of 0.3 percentage points, 0.3. I mean, it's a tight one. It kind of almost reminds me of the 2004 U.S. Senate race between Jim Bunning and Daniel Mangiardo, which Mangiardo came out of Louisville with a big lead, and Bunning came storming back at the end and actually overtook him for a very narrow victory.
Of course, there is no mandatory recount law in Kentucky. Bevin may request counties recanvass the results, which is not actually a recount, but rather a check of the vote count to ensure that the results were added correctly. So, interesting, because I think you said earlier that you've never, to your recollection, seen that happen.
I've never seen a statewide recount. I think the biggest recount in Kentucky we've ever had happened in the 1990s in a 3rd district congressional race here in Louisville. But again, I cannot recall a statewide recount. And I'm looking back here.
Well, Andy Beshear clearly is going on and acting like he is the next governor of Kentucky. He's taking over that role. He's standing on stage with his family at their headquarters down on Breckenridge Street in downtown Louisville.
If I had 4,000 votes more than my opponent, I would do that too.
I would, yeah, yeah. Well, you know what I think the best thing we can do at this point is, Mr. Girth? I think maybe we can say goodnight to our viewers, and we can come back tomorrow morning and do kind of a rehash of what's happened and see if there's any more, if AP has come out and said that recounted to a point where they can actually say what the numbers are.
Yeah, I suspect that they might just sit on it at this point and wait for the State Board of Elections to act, because they're not going to get any better numbers than they have tonight, I don't suspect.
No. All right. So, well, thank goodness for your insight in all this. That's what happens when you've got a couple of years under your belt.
Yeah, a few. Well, thank you for giving me somebody to talk to out here, because it would be real boring if this was a monologue, I can promise you that.
Well, next time I'll bring pastries.
All right, good deal.
All right.
It's a deal.
Thanks so much for watching. We appreciate it. You've been watching the Courier Journal's election night coverage with Joe Girth, and I'm Kirby Adams, and the rest of the Courier Journal political team.
Good night.